Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Hello,
Hey,
Counselor.
Councilor Ramos.
Hope everyone is doing well.
Yes, we are.
Gonna go ahead and get this meeting started because we only have so much time. We have to get ready for our 7 o'clock meeting. And so let's get started. This is a public safety meeting of the Springfield City Council. I am your chairman, Orlando Ramos, joined by councilors Walsh, Gomez, Whitfield, Davila, and who am I missing?
Hurst.
And Councilor Hurst. Thank you for joining us. Councilor Hurst and Councilor Whitfield are members of this committee. We have one item on the agenda this evening, which is discussion of the litigation with in regards to the police commission. And so I don't have much to say. I'm just going to turn it over to our attorneys for an update on where we are and possible next steps. As far as much as we can share in open session, we do not plan on going into executive session this evening. So whatever we can share in open session, that's what we will discuss tonight. So I'll turn it over and welcome to our attorneys.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. It's just me tonight. Tom is traveling to Washington, D.C., so cannot make it. But I'm happy to be here with you all. So, as you know, we prevailed in the lawsuit before the trial court, the Superior Court. The decision that the judge issued was a great decision. It was very nuanced. He didn't just accept our argument. He obviously didn't accept their argument, but he did consider every argument that that the mayor had made, took it seriously, and dealt with it with nuance, which is great. It's part of what makes it a great decision. And now, obviously, following the decision, the mayor has had his counsel file a notice of appeal with the Superior Court, with the trial court. That notice goes to the trial court. It doesn't go straight to the appeals court. And so that's just notifying the court of Mayor Sarno's intention to appeal the decision to an appeals court. So the next step, and I'll try not to go on too long so you all can ask questions that you might have, but the next step is for the trial court to what we call assemble the record. That just means put all the documents together into a nice, neat package, might be a virtual package, to send along to the appeals court. That shouldn't take long in this case. You know, there's COVID and there's busy court schedule, so everything takes longer than you might think, but it shouldn't take too long in this case. There was no trial. There aren't tons of documents. They're basically the summary judgment pleadings, you know, the complaint itself, but then our legal arguments and the mayor's legal arguments as to the merits of the case, along with the exhibits that were submitted and then the court's decision. So it's not an extensive record. It's not like a typical trial with all sorts of, you know, factual disputes that result in, you know, days of trial with witness testimony, and then you want to get the transcripts from that testimony. We don't have all that. So hopefully the process of assembling the record does not take too long. Once the record is assembled, then Sarno's counsel will file the paperwork with the appeals court to appeal the decision. So upon doing that, that will trigger a timeline but during which the court will identify when each party's briefs are due. So because Mayor Sarno, in this case, is the appellant, the party appealing the trial court's decision, Mayor Sarno's brief will be due first, and then after Mayor Sarno's brief is filed, we'll respond to that. But that we don't know when it will happen, and it won't happen for months. We have to wait for the record to be assembled. We have to wait for Sarno to file with the appeals court. And then after that, there's another period of time that we'll have to wait until we actually receive Sarno's brief. So that could easily be not until mid-fall. There is a slight chance, so the way it works in Massachusetts is you have the trial court level, then you have the intermediate appeals court, and then above that is the Supreme Judicial Court, the highest appellate court in the state court system. So by default, this goes to the Massachusetts Appeals Court. It's theoretically possible that the Supreme Judicial Court will see the appeal, and they do see all appeals, and find it interesting enough that they want to snatch it and have it go directly to the highest level court. That would be a little unusual, but not impossible. So in terms of a timeline, in all likelihood, we wouldn't be seeing the brief from Sarno until at least early fall, if not mid-fall. And then we will have a good chunk of time after that to respond. So that's what it looks like in terms of timing. During the pendency of the appeal, the decision that the trial court rendered in the city council's favor is just stayed. Nothing happens with that decision. So it's not that Sarno could elect to comply with the decision, but we have no reason to think that he's going to elect to do that. So the court's decision is not binding on him presently. It won't be binding on him until the appeal is over, and if the appellate courts affirm the judgment, then it'll be binding on Sarno, and sometime after that, he'll be directed to comply with the order, or he'll have to comply with the order, I should say. One outstanding issue, I saw on Mass Live, I can't remember if it was today, but over the weekend, the issue of how much money the city has spent on this appeal. And I think this is my first time appearing before you at a public meeting, and just want to confirm that we are going to continue to do this on a pro bono basis. We're not going to try to charge the city council or the city any monies for our efforts. So I'll pause there. If you guys have some questions, please go ahead.
Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Attorney. And we all appreciate the fact that you're planning to continue to represent us on a pro bono basis. We appreciate it. And unfortunately, sometimes it has to come to that, or else we would not have representation. So we appreciate both of your work, and thank you. Question for you though, in the decision, can we talk at all about the decision or no?
We can. We shouldn't talk about anything that you would think of as being attorney-client privileged, and that would include things like strategy. But honestly, there's not a lot that there is to discuss that would necessarily need to be shielded from the public. At this point, we have a decision. Everybody's read the decision. I think it's pretty obvious what our arguments are going to be on appeal. But that said, if something sounds like it might be attorney-client privilege, maybe refrain. Otherwise, yeah, go ahead and ask.
All right. So I sensed a little ambiguity in the decision in terms of the potential transition of power and the role of the city, and the role that the city council might have in that. And the fact that we didn't necessarily ask for the judge per se to spell out what that looks like. And then we also haven't spelled out what that might look like in an ordinance fashion. And so it seemed to me like the judge was a little, was I don't know if you could say concerned, but certainly highlighted that he expects to see something, whether it comes from us or whether it comes from the executive level, which seemed to me that it makes sense to come from us to ensure a smooth transition. Would you recommend folks start thinking about what that looks like now? Or would you recommend folks kind of holding off? Because it does seem like there are a lot of details that might need to be worked out, and 6 months to a year can come fairly quickly. And if we want to see a smooth transition and a quick transition, it would seem to me that us as a body might need to dot our I's and cross our T's. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess ultimately my thoughts are going to be, I would defer to you all to use your best judgment. But with that said, what the judge highlighted, number one, we'd asked for 3 different types of relief that all sort of got to the same place. Declaratory relief, where the court would just declare that the city council had the right to establish this board of police commissioners. But then the other 2 were asking the court to order the mayor to implement it immediately. And as the judge properly pointed out, to be honest, in denying us those other forms of relief, there is this sort of deference to other branches of government, and in this case, the mayor, that assumes if the judge declares that the ordinance is valid, the court need not order him to comply with the ordinance, because he is an elected official with Mayor Sarno is an elected official with a duty to honor the law and implement the law as appropriate. So the court didn't order Sarno to form the commission in a particular fashion, but basically said that that is what is required of him. The next step for us would be that, or I should say for the city council, if we're so lucky to be representing you and to participate in that, is if the mayor, after the decision becomes binding because it's been appealed and there's no further appeal available, so after the decision becomes binding, then the mayor would be required to go ahead and form the commission. If the mayor failed to do that, then we'd have to go back to court and then request injunctive relief. And at that point, the court would, upon appreciating, assuming we ever got to that circumstance, that the mayor hadn't gone ahead and formed the commission, then the court would be more likely to entertain that injunctive relief. So the first part, I think that kind of goes to your question is, once the decision is final and binding, the mayor will have the duty to comply with the law that's been declared by the court and form the commission. If he doesn't, then unfortunately there'd be another legal action required that would have to be pursued. The courts have this deferential rule, just assuming that a mayor would in fact comply with the law once the law became clear. And I assume that that's the case here, that Mayor Sarno would do the same. Now, then beyond that issue of declaratory relief versus injunctive relief, the judge pointed out certain aspects of the law that could be better clarified. The judge said that the requirements of who may serve as a commissioner can't be implemented. They're basically void. It doesn't void the ordinance, but that the portion of the ordinance that requires commissioners to satisfy certain criteria, that's void. That's not too big of a deal as far as we're concerned, and it's up to the city council to decide how important that is to the city council, but the mayor just gets to decide who the commissioners are going to be and appoint them. And there are other parameters that the mayor has to comply with in terms of qualifications outside of the ordinance. So the mayor will still have to comply with those qualifications established elsewhere. So that aspect of the ordinance need not be followed by the mayor once he is appointing members to the board of commissioners. And then there's another issue that the judge highlighted as well, which is the duties of the Police Review Commission. And the judge's decision, essentially said, you could see how it could be confusing to somebody reading through the ordinance on its face, what the precise duties are. But the mayor also made it clear, which was our argument in our legal briefs, that it's apparent enough what the powers of the Police Review Commission are. It is to oversee the police department. And that's the portion of the decision where I think the mayor said the city council and the mayor might want to have a dialogue and maybe take further action to further clarify that. And that might be the area that at some point down the road, you want to give some thought to. I would consider that separate enough from the crux of what this dispute was, whether or not the Police Review Commission should be formed, that it's not necessary to do it now and in advance. It doesn't mean you won't want to do it. And you could do it after the Police Review Commission is formed. I think the way I read the ordinance and the decision generally is this Board of Police Commissioners would be responsible for overseeing the police department. That seems relatively clear. That said, if you're concerned that the commission would not have enough, guidance, and that additional clarification in a revised ordinance would be helpful, then great. The one thing you don't want to do is change the ordinance in a way to suggest that, oh, that decision no longer applies because we have a new ordinance. That's just going to, further kick the can down the road and figuring out, of course, perhaps Mayor Sarno would agree with the reforms that you're suggesting. And if Mayor Sarno was on board with the reform, that might actually obviate the need for an appeal, because if he agrees to implement the new ordinance, then hey, great. But there's a reason we got as far as we have with this dispute. So I suspect that trying to figure that out now might be premature. But again, I would defer to the city council to decide whether or not you want to be, like you said, a year will come quickly. And then if you feel like it's something that you want to tackle before the commission's formed, that's up to you all to decide. Perhaps in further consultation with us, but.
Thank you, attorney, and great work.
Thank you, Counselor. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. Are there any other questions from the council? I just have one quick question. So what is the, if you can share this in open meeting, what is the mayor's grounds for appeal?
Well, the mayor's grounds for appeal, we won't truly know until we've seen his appeal brief. That said, it's essentially going to be the same arguments that were included in his memorandum in support of his motion for summary judgment. So we resolved this dispute, what we call on the papers, without a trial. So we submitted our legal arguments, the mayor submitted his legal arguments. So the legal arguments available to the mayor now are the legal arguments that were included in his legal briefs. He might make all of those legal arguments again. He might decide to only make some of those legal arguments. That's going to be up to the mayor and his attorneys. But there shouldn't be other legal arguments that are raised. So I won't try to go through them, but they would be the same arguments that he raised in his legal briefs during the trial phase that we just got through. And basically, he would just say that the trial court judge, Judge Flannery, got these legal issues wrong as a matter of law. And so he'd have to argue that the judge was wrong as a matter of law on these different issues that were raised. Does that?
Yes, that does answer my question. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the council? I say again before we adjourn, are there any other questions from the council? All right, seeing none. Thanks everybody for joining us. And thank you, Attorney Aleo, for being here and for all of your work on this issue. And we look forward to another victory.
Great. Yeah.
Again, thank you for representing us in the appeal process. And please communicate with me if there are any new developments that you think are relevant that we should know about.
Thank you very much. I will. It's been really a pleasure working with you guys. Thank you all.